The biting wind from the icy mountains blew with relentless fury, carrying with it ice crystals that pierced the air like invisible blades. In the white vastness of the Rocky Mountains, where winter transforms the world into a frozen and deadly desert, a small creature struggled against forces far greater than itself. A lynx cub, only a few weeks old, walked disoriented through the deep snow, its tiny steps sinking with each desperate movement. Its blue eyes, still hazy from its young age, tried to see through the thick curtain of snow that fell mercilessly. The little one shouldn't be there. Separated from its mother during a sudden storm, the cub was alone for the first time in its brief existence, and nature does not forgive the weak. But what would happen next would defy everything we know about the law of survival, about natural enemies, and about the limits of compassion in the animal kingdom. If you've made it this far, it's because stories like this touch something deep within you. You value moments when nature reminds us that there are forces greater than the instinct for survival. This channel is dedicated to bringing you real and moving stories from the animal world, narratives that inspire, connect, and make us believe in the goodness that exists even in the most unlikely places. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these heartwarming stories, even on the coldest days. Now let me tell you how a ferocious predator became the most unlikely savior of all. The storm had begun at dawn, but now, in the middle of the afternoon, the blizzard had turned into something apocalyptic. The sky had disappeared under a menacing grey blanket, and the temperature had plummeted to 20 degrees below zero. The lynx cub, which biologists would later call a juvenile specimen of Lynx rufus, measured just over 20 centimeters in length. Its spotted coat, normally perfect camouflage among the rocks and vegetation, had now become an icy prison. Each fine hair was covered by a growing layer of ice, transforming its soft body into a rigid, cold sculpture. The cub's mother had gone hunting the previous morning, leaving her two cubs hidden in a rocky crevice. But when the storm arrived with unexpected speed and violence, something had gone wrong. The cub, still lacking a fully developed instinct for danger, had left the protection of its den, perhaps attracted by some movement or sound, and now it was lost. Its weak meows were swallowed by the deafening howl of the wind. Each breath became more difficult, the icy air burning its tiny lungs. Its paws, delicate and still ill-suited for long walks, bled slightly where the frozen snow had cut into the soft pads. The cub tried to keep moving, following a primal instinct that told it that stopping meant death. But its tiny body was losing the battle against the cold. Hypothermia began its cruel work, first robbing its extremities. Its front paws trembled uncontrollably, then stopped responding to the brain's commands. The little lynx stumbled, fell in the snow, and for the first time, couldn't get up immediately. At that moment, a few kilometers away, another inhabitant of those mountains faced the same storm. A lone gray wolf, a male with silver fur and amber eyes, walked with determination through the blizzard. At 5 years old, he was in his physical prime, with powerful muscles beneath his dense fur and an intelligence sharpened by countless winters. He wasn't just any wolf. He was an animal that knew that territory like the back of his paw. Every valley, every ravine, every shelter from the storms. But he too was alone. Expelled from his original pack by a younger, more aggressive alpha male, the silver wolf had been wandering for months in search of new territory. Loneliness weighed on him in ways that only social animals can understand. Wolves weren't made to live in isolation. They are creatures of family, of hierarchy, of shared warmth on cold nights. And perhaps it was precisely this loneliness, this absence of purpose and companionship, that would make him sensitive to what he was about to encounter. The wolf was following a narrow trail on a hillside when its sense of smell, infinitely more acute than that of any human, picked up something. A faint scent, almost imperceptible beneath the dominant aroma of snow and icy pine. It was the scent of another predator, but also something more, the scent of fragility, of life fading away. Its hunting nature should have drawn it in for obvious reasons. Lynxes and wolves compete for the same territory, for the same prey. They are, by definition, rivals. A vulnerable lynx cub would, under normal circumstances, be just an easy meal or at best something to be ignored. But something made the wolf stop and turn its head toward the scent. He moved carefully through the deep snow, his large furry paws distributing his weight so that he wouldn't sink completely. His amber eyes swept across the endless white until finally he saw it. A small, dark shape against the snow, almost completely buried, only its tiny head and part of its back still visible. The lynx cub had stopped moving. Its eyes were closed, and its body trembled in weak, irregular spasms, the organism's last effort to generate heat before giving up completely. The wolf approached slowly, each step deliberate and cautious. When he was less than a meter from the cub, he stopped and observed. The little lynx didn't even notice the giant predator's presence. It was beyond consciousness, lost in an all-consuming cold. The wolf tilted his head, studying the diminutive creature. His instincts told him contradictory things. This was a potential competitor. This was easy prey. This was an intruder in territory he claimed. But this was also a baby, a defenseless creature, dying alone in the cold. And something in the wolf, something that scientists are still struggling to fully explain, something that may be the spark of empathy that exists in all social mammals, spoke louder. He took another step forward. Then, in a move that would defy the logic of survival, the wolf lay down in the snow next to the lynx cub. The contrast between the two animals was striking. The wolf, with its 45 kilograms of muscle and dense fur, looked like a mountain next to the tiny creature that weighed less than a kilogram. Carefully, using its snout, the wolf began to gently push snow away from the cub's body. Then, with delicate movements that seemed impossible for jaws capable of crushing bones, it grasped the cub by the loose skin at the nape of its neck and pulled it closer to its own body. The lynx cub barely reacted, only a weak whimper escaping its throat. The wolf then curled into a C shape around the icy little body, creating a living barrier against the biting wind. Its large, warm body enveloped the cub completely, and its thick tail curled over it, creating a kind of protective cocoon. The wolf's dense fur, developed through thousands of generations to withstand the most brutal winters, now served a purpose that evolution never foresaw. Slowly, very slowly, the warmth began to transfer. The wolf's body, a biological furnace generating heat with every heartbeat, every breath, began to reverse the deadly process of hypothermia. Minutes turned into half an hour. The wolf didn't move except to adjust its position occasionally, ensuring the pup was as protected as possible. The storm continued to howl around them, but there in that small refuge of fur and determination, the world was different. Then, after what seemed like an eternity, the lynx cub began to show signs of real life. Its eyes opened for the first time in hours, blinking confusedly and still blurry. Its muscles began to respond again, and small tremors, this time of recovery and not of imminent death, ran through its little body. The cub raised its head slightly and for the first time realized where it was. Its blue eyes, still childlike and unable to focus completely, met the wolf's face. It was a moment that should have been terrifying. Lynxes and wolves don't hug, don't share warmth, don't save each other. But the cub, perhaps too young to understand the concept of predator and prey, or perhaps understanding on some instinctive level that this grey giant had saved its life, showed no fear. Instead, it emitted a small, sharp sound, something between a meow and a purr. The wolf lowered its head until its snout gently touched the cub's head. For a few seconds, the two animals remained like that, their breaths mingling in the cold air, two hearts beating at different rhythms, but connected by something beyond natural logic. The wolf then began to lick the cub, removing the ice from its fur, drying the dangerous moisture, stimulating circulation with precise movements of its rough tongue. It wasn't how a lynx mother would care for her baby, but it was working. With each lick, more color returned to the cub's pink little ears, more strength returned to its small limbs. The storm began to subside in the early evening, the wind losing its murderous fury, and the snow reducing from an impenetrable curtain to more spaced-out flakes. The wolf stayed with the cub for hours, its own body suffering from lack of movement and food, but refusing to abandon the small life it had chosen to protect. When night finally fell completely, and the stars began to appear through the dispersing clouds, the wolf slowly rose. The cub, now significantly stronger, managed to stand on its own paws, still trembling but functional. The wolf observed the little lynx for a long moment, as if assessing its chances of survival. Then it made a decision that would surprise any biologist studying animal behavior. Instead of simply leaving the cub there and continuing on its way, the wolf began to walk slowly down the slope, stopping every few meters to look back, checking if the cub was following. And the little lynx, guided by a survival instinct that now mingled with something close to trust, followed. Its steps were clumsy and slow, but it moved. The wolf adjusted his pace to match that of the cub, a patience he would never show to a member of his own pack. They descended the mountain together, an unlikely pair under a sky that slowly opened to reveal a crescent moon. The wolf knew the territory and knew where to look. There were several rock formations in the area, places where a lynx mother might have established a den. He followed his instincts and his knowledge of the land, and the cub followed him with growing determination. After nearly an hour of careful walking, they reached a rocky outcrop beside a small pine grove. The wolf stopped, its nostrils working intensely. It had detected something, the scent of an adult lynx, strong and recent. It had also detected another scent, fainter but unmistakable to its sensitive nose. Another cub. The den was there, hidden behind fallen rocks and branches, and inside a mother lynx waited, her body tense with worry and loss. She had searched for her lost cub for hours, but the storm had forced her to return to protect the other baby. Now, detecting the approaching scent, she cautiously emerged from the den, ready to defend her territory. But what she saw froze her. Her lost cub, the one she thought was dead, was there. And beside it, keeping a respectful distance, was a grey wolf. The two predators observed each other across a distance of perhaps 10 meters. The tension in the air was palpable. The lynx mother had every reason to attack, to defend her cubs from that deadly intruder. But something about the wolf's posture, something about the way he remained quiet and non-threatening, something about the fact that her cub was alive and moving towards her, made the lynx hesitate. The cub let out a loud, recognizable meow, and the mother responded with her own call. The little one quickened his pace, stumbling and running awkwardly towards the safety of his mother's arms. The lynx mother gently took him by the scruff of the neck and pulled him close, sniffing every inch of his body, checking for injuries, recognizing by the scent that he had been dangerously close to death, but also detecting the unmistakable scent of the wolf on his fur. She looked again at the grey wolf, who remained motionless, observing the reunion with those intelligent amber eyes. For a moment that seemed suspended in time. The two predators, mother and unlikely savior, shared something that defied words. A recognition, perhaps, an understanding that on that day the normal rules of nature had been set aside. Then, slowly, without breaking eye contact, the wolf began to walk away. He turned his back to the den, a gesture of trust and not aggression, and began to climb the mountainside again. He didn't look back. The lynx mother watched the wolf until its silvery form disappeared into the darkness and the trees. Then, carrying her precious cub, she returned to the den, where warmth, safety, and her other baby awaited. Inside that small rocky cave, the family reunited. The cub that had been given up for lost now nursed eagerly, its body still weak, but alive. And somewhere in the mountains, a lone wolf continued its journey, perhaps carrying with it the memory that even in solitude, even in the bitterest cold, there is room for choices that go beyond mere survival. This story reminds us that compassion isn't exclusively human. It exists in the depths of nature, in the decisions animals make when faced with choices between instinct and something greater. If this narrative touched your heart, please like it, so more people can learn about this extraordinary moment between two creatures who should be enemies but chose a different path. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness exists in the most unexpected places. And tell us in the comments, have you ever witnessed a moment when an animal showed compassion for another species? Your stories matter, and create a community of people who believe the world can still surprise us with beauty and hope. Thank you for being here. Until the next story that will warm your heart.